Hi, welcome back to another episode of Next Big Fit. Guys, this has been a very, very interesting and intriguing season. As I start every episode, I tell you I am very, very excited about the episode, and I tell you why. Today's excitement is because Ben, who's come from Staple.io, he's founded, he is the CEO. First of all, very interesting name. He has taken a very interesting path towards building the business. And then John will come in, obviously. Once we have done all of this discussion, then John comes in and then talks to Ben in more detail about, how he's working with banks, financial institutions, what is happening there. So without taking any more time away from you, Ben, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Laksh. Thanks for having me.
Very intrigued since the first time I've heard your story. And why don't you tell your story to the audience on the episode today?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Ben. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of Staple. Admittedly, I'm probably one of the least technical people in our company today. We have a lot of engineers, PhDs that work in the team, but I've come from a very much a corporate and business background. So I am an accountant and a lawyer by trade.
Yes.
Throughout my career, I've worked as a consultant, as a CFO. I've worked in some PE funds. So I have a good understanding of some of the challenges that businesses face. And one of those challenges was around organizations rationalizing their operations to maybe get geo arbitrage and offshoring. This was a challenge when I started out because I found that although there were some efficiencies gained by these BPO operations or offshoring teams, it was quite a challenge to get those gains when you were dealing with a range of documentation. Perhaps they were quite complex documents. Perhaps they were multi-language documents where the BPO team and the people in those teams weren't equipped to handle those documents. So this was a challenge that I encountered in my career. It was a challenge I looked into in about 2017, 2018, and met my co-founder in 2018, 2019. We started looking at this problem seriously. I spoke to about 150 companies around Southeast Asia to really validate that my problem wasn't a unique problem.
Yeah.
And found that the vast majority of those companies had the same issue. At that time, I was in Singapore, so particularly a global multinational market.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of companies that had this challenge of multimodal, multi-format, multi-language documentation in their back office operations.
Right.
So we started from there.
Yeah. So you face this challenge on your own.
Right.
And, and it is a big challenge, right? You have
Absolutely
this hordes of unstructured data coming in from, let's say, different languages, different formats, etc. and stuff. And you're looking at this and you're like, there should be a better way of solving this.
Right.
Any company which is operating in more than a few jurisdictions, you will face this challenge and stuff.
Exactly.
So out of curiosity, why did you name the company Staple? By the way?
So it's probably one of the easier things we did when we started out. So Staple is a kind of a hat tip to the fact that we deal with documentation.
Okay.
Staple is basically a very well-engineered but simple product that keeps your documents together. And so it's easy to use. It's versatile. You can use it for a range of document types. Unlike a traditional Staple or software, but we found that was a very, very nice name. And the fact that if you use Staple as an adjective, it's essential. It's fundamental to the operations of an organization. So it's a staple software. Yeah.
Oh, I'm so glad I asked you that question. That is like, there's a whole science behind that.
Yeah.
Okay. And Ben, so you start, towards solving this problem that unstructured information sits in different languages, different formats, etc. and stuff. How did you first start about solving this? Obviously, you have a big solution now. Walk us through the early days of how were you solving this?
Right. So we started solving this problem using AI even from day one. So this was 2019. AI was around, but it wasn't as hot as it is now.
Yeah.
The company name actually is Staple AI, and it always has been. Right. So it's in our DNA. So we worked with a lot of proprietary AI that we developed ourselves. At one point we had 4 different PhDs in the team that were working on different aspects of our models. We had some traditional machine learning techniques. Our CTO is a specialist in AI himself. So we were building solutions to handle the variety of use cases we're encountering across the region. But I have to admit, when we started out, we were a very different company. We were focused more on small business. Yeah. We didn't go after banks and enterprises straight away. So the challenges that we were working to solve were a little bit more uniform. The same kind of documents that every small business faced. Granted, it was multi-language, but they weren't incredibly complex documents. They were more things like shipping documentation or invoices. Yeah. So we had those documents to work with. We built models to handle the variety of styles, layouts, file types that those documents came in, and we trained our models from there. Right. Using a range of different technologies that were available at the time. Not just AI, but also some computer vision techniques to help clean up the images we were receiving. Many of these documents are physical documents that are photographed or scanned, so you have to do a number of steps to kind of get the data into a format that can be read and understood by the AI. So that's where we got our start. Yeah.
And what happened that you said we are now ready for the big banks and the big firms?
Admittedly, it was not an entirely deliberate decision at the time. I like to think now, in hindsight, it was the right decision. But I said we started out in about 2019. We all know what happened in 2020. And COVID came and really tested and ended a lot of the organizations we were working with in terms of customers, small businesses at the time. We were fortunate to get an opportunity to work with some large enterprises. And it turned out that the robustness of the solution we'd built was a good fit for enterprises too, because we could handle very high volumes. Enterprises and banks, by their nature, they're typically multi-jurisdictional, multi-country organizations. So our solution was well equipped to handle the requirements that they had. So we started working with one of the big 4 firms. We started working with a couple of banks, initially with POCs, but those POCs were successful and we converted those to full contracts. And from there we realized, hey, let's work with enterprises exclusively. That is our target market. These are the kinds of organizations that have the biggest pain in this domain.
Right. And now I'm very interesting, Jenny. Thank you for being so honest that it was it was less deliberate than most people like they will come out and they're like,
I'm not going to play down the aspect of luck that was involved.
Okay. What were you now doing differently when you came to enterprises? You were dealing with SMEs, etc. What did you start changing in your own approach as a firm when you start dealing with these enterprises? Because this episode is being heard by most big banks, etc., etc. I do want them to appreciate what it takes for a firm to go from an SME customer to a big bank. So please.
Yeah, I can talk about this from the perspective of how we built the software and how we engineered the customer journey. SMEs, as you would probably know, it's similar to how consumers would access software. It's typically very, very self-serve. You expect that you can go to the website, sign up, start using the product or straight away and without any restriction. There shouldn't be any real barriers to testing, or you don't really need to connect with other systems. You can access it out of the box and you can start using it from day one. And that's what most people expect, both as a consumer or an SME. Enterprises, there's a lot more complexity involved. There's obviously the security and integration aspects. You have other systems to talk to. You have potentially many more users that need to be trained. You have maybe one or several use cases that software should be addressing.
Yep.
So one of the big changes we had was that we had to build a team that could help or handhold our customers through this process of onboarding our software.
Yeah.
It's not as simple as just going to the website and signing up and using on a day one.
Yeah.
There are a lot of preconditions that need to be satisfied. There are a lot of security checks that need to be checked off. And there are users that need to be trained. So we have basically supporting services that are available to supplement our software to make sure that the onboarding journey is frictionless. And I think a lot of our enterprise customers are happy to pay for that additional service, provided it solves the problem.
Yeah.
Like they just want the problem solved.
Yep.
and solved well. So that was a big change for us. Our team structure changed quite a bit. We have dedicated staff that help with the onboarding journey and then with the post go live journey as well. That wasn't such a factor when we were servicing the SME market.
Great answer. I really hope that if there are any fintech entrepreneurs listening to this episode, they take a leaf out of your book. That, when you go from, let's say, a buy-side client or relatively medium-sized client on the buy side, etc., to a large enterprise, you have to plan for that journey. You have to plan for the complexity that is going to come with a client of this size. I quite often feel, and I've been in sales and on the other side for a very, very long time, that fintechs underappreciate the amount of prep and the amount of things you would need to do before you go live with an enterprise customer. And when I was hearing that was like it was music in like
I haven't even talked about the additional kind of certifications you need, the SOC 2, ISO 27001, HIPAA if you're dealing with healthcare data. There's GDPR requirements that you can have, your capabilities can be audited in that respect as well. I think if you don't have these, it's probably you're probably a non-starter for a lot of enterprises or particularly banks and insurance companies.
And fintech entrepreneurs are a big chunk of our audience. What is, how would you advise them to prepare for this journey of going to an enterprise customer?
Oh, okay. Good question. I think the first one is always the hardest. And once you have one or two of these customers, live and under your belt, so to speak, the journey becomes much easier. You know what to expect because you've been through it. The first one is the hardest because often you don't know even how to price your product. You don't know, you don't know the full extent of the security or integration requirements that are expected of these organizations. Unless for some reason you've already gone through the SOC 2 certification process or the ISO certification process, you probably have all the answers to that already. Yeah. But if you haven't, first of all, consider getting those. But if you haven't, you will have to do some kind of POC, very extensive questionnaires around security and how your product fits into the enterprise environment. But I guess some big learnings that I've taken away is firstly, be prepared to do a POC, but be prepared to price for it. Don't do a free POC.
Great suggestion. Don't do a free POC. John is going to be with you from, who's head of innovation for a very large bank. You should tell him that also.
Happy to. There's a few reasons for that. It's very easy for a customer or a prospective customer to walk away from a free POC. Even if a paid POC takes longer to close, at least it demonstrates that there's buy-in from both sides of the transaction. Yep. You need, if you're delivering an enterprise solution, it's going to take help from both the customer side and the vendor side to deliver the right fit solution for the organization. So you want to make sure that they have skin in the game. So charge for POC, please, if you're a fintech founder listening to this.
I cannot agree more with that. Ben is speaking from some great experience, and I'm sure like painful experiences as well.
Yeah.
Now, please, by all means, I think that is a great advice, that charge for POCs. It brings in a co-investment into the process.
Exactly.
And it makes sure that everybody is like going to move on together. Great answer. Let me bring you back to an earlier thing you said, this will tell you I'm listening.
Good.
You said you've used computer vision, to do this. You have your own teams, etc.
Right.
And you had obviously spoken to a few hundred, about 150 enterprises to figure out that this is a real problem, right?
Yep.
Now there are enterprise vendors who exist to do this, right? Open, don't want to take their name, don't want a copyright notice. They exist. There are other systems that exist. What did you think you would do different to them that you took this leap on going out and building a new firm around this? You could take their technology, customize it, etc. Right?
Yeah.
What were you thinking you will do so different that you have to start a firm rather than build upon a solution?
Ooh, good question. You're taking me back here, but at the time, a lot of the solutions on the market were either very large North American companies or potentially European companies. Yes, they were very large enterprises, but they were very much focused on English or Latin character data processing.
Okay.
So they weren't so much focused on building their capabilities around various Asian scripts. Keep in mind, this is 2019, so 2018, 2019. And this leaves out a big chunk of the global market. Asia's 60% of the world's GDP and population. So it is an underserved market. And we were in Singapore at the time. The feedback we were getting was that we would love to automate this process, but we haven't found a solution that can adequately or accurately handle the kinds of document feeds that we are processing.
Yeah.
So therefore, we have teams of 20, 80, hundreds of people processing this documentation. That was one reason. And then the other reason was that the solutions that were available, and granted, some of them have been available for 10 or 20 years, were very much template-based, meaning that the software expects specific data points to appear in a specific location, right? This is kind of a solved problem now, but for the longest time, traditional OCR, optical character recognition, was looking for data in a certain point in the page. This works for static documents that don't have a lot of variability, bank statements, maybe application forms if they're printed, but it doesn't work so well when you have potentially infinite variations, like with invoices.
Yep.
Or with handwritten delivery notes. These become more challenging. So we saw a real shortcoming in that domain, and there were these kinds of documents in Singapore and more generally Asia and Southeast Asia. So our solution is flexible enough to handle this full range of documentation, typed, handwritten. Doesn't matter where the data appears on the page. But not just unstructured, we also do structured data as well. Yeah. So we do electronic data interchange, e-invoice, various documents that are that never actually appear on a document as we understand it, but they do appear in some kind of API feed. So we have a single solution that brings all the structured and unstructured data sources together.
Yeah, and great setup. Now you are, we know why you took this jump. You saw a big need around Asian characters. Obviously, templatization, like pre-templatization was a problem. I've experienced this before. If you're not in this template, then you have to create a new template and you have to go about that. It is a pain, and you can't really control that whole process throughout the chain. It is hard. You're not going to get a vendor to change because you are only understanding this. So great problem statement to solve. We are around 2020. You have made this switch to enterprises.
Right.
We are a financial industry podcast. Walk us through a few use cases that you're doing for the financial industry on a large enterprise scale.
Right. So there are some use cases that are common to both financial services and the non-financial service customers that we support. So, a lot of the back office document processing around procurement and vendor management. Yeah. So your invoice management, et cetera. But for financial services specific use cases, there's a range of services we offer around KYC and onboarding.
Yeah.
There's a range of document types in the insurance space, such as claims, policy documentation. There is things like broker statements, tax documentation. So this is a kind of a single solution that supports all those use cases, as opposed to having a different tool for different areas of the organization. So one of the appealing aspects of our solution that CFOs and CTOs really like about us is it's one solution to service an organization across all geographies and across all business units. So it's the underlying data processing layer for the whole organization. So on one hand, we can process, things like e-invoices, which are fully structured, all the data from those, all the way through to things like handwritten application forms. We don't just extract the data, but we also match it and compare the data points across multiple documents. So in one processing flow, you can submit your proof of income documents, your proof of ID documents, your proof of address documents, as well as a handwritten application form, and we'll process it all together, identify the anomalies, and if there's an issue, we loop in a human to handle that issue. If there's no issue, we can do the straight through processing. Now, one thing that we've come across in some banking use cases, for example, a lot of these documents aren't all in the same language. So there could be some account holders that have addresses or accounts in, China, and it's in Mandarin, but they have their submission in Singapore in English, their application form in English. We can still do that matching process despite the cross-language processing challenge. Every data point we process, we can extract and index and make it searchable down the line. So for an insurance use case, you could query our system to find specific pieces of information around, perhaps in a health insurance context, which of our policyholders have this particular condition or in this country, and the system can return answers, business insights, graphical insights, based on that query, plain language query, without the need to spin up a separate data lake or data warehouse. It's all within the system. This is something that we've been jointly working on with Google recently in a recent AI program.
Yeah.
So it's not just this first step of data extraction.
Yeah.
There's data reconciliation, and there's data insights that come out of our product as well.
And you're building something which is like a precursor to a lot of predictive analysis.
Right.
A lot of fraud management, a lot of understanding your customers better. Hyper-personalization could be built on the top of this if you could bring in those forms they have filled in and many years ago, etc. So this could be a precursor to building a pipeline towards hyper-personalization as well.
Absolutely.
And which has been obviously a very, very big problem in the industry, or on an opportunity for the industry to solve for, because with that you can take great advice to a large number of customers. And Ben, I'm sitting here and I'm hearing your answers. They're obviously fantastic. You're doing such a great job. I'm wondering, and this comes as my own experience. You go into a bank, you talk about this solution. The technology team comes back and says, we can build this on our own. Computer vision is so common. And so walk us through, how do you deal with that?
That's happened a couple of times.
I'm surprised it has only happened a couple of times. Yeah.
It's happened and they've gone away and tried.
Yeah.
And then they've reached out to us again, perhaps a year later, because not as simple as it may first seem. I guess there are a variety of APIs and perhaps in-house and open source tools that these banks could use to build a solution. And you can start relatively simply. You can build, a solution that could say, let's say, bank statements, printed bank statements that are PDF in English in Singapore. Maybe you use a combination of generative AI and maybe OCR if you need to, if there's scans or photos of those bank statements.
Yeah.
But then you throw some bank statements from Thailand into the mix, and then some other handwritten documents from maybe Vietnam, and then you'll start to see the accuracy go down, and then suddenly you're dealing with some structured data that don't, that perhaps originates not from documents but from some kind of XML feed or anything like that. The challenge becomes maintaining all these different pipelines to handle the variety of documents that you're dealing with. And the trap that I think a lot of people are falling into now is trying to apply generative AI solutions as the first port of call for these problems, when there are options out there that are much faster and much cheaper and can do the job just as well. So that's one of the things that we do, is that I'll go back to the example with the multi-language bank statements. Maybe you try something with ChatGPT or OpenAI's API, and you get pretty good results for English, not so good results for Thai or for Mandarin. So you find that the API from Jipu in China may do a better job for Chinese script, Chinese language.
Yes.
So suddenly you're maintaining, a few different endpoints to get this solution. So if generative AI is required to get the best outcomes, then we do use Gen AI. Which models do we use? We use the best models, meaning that we use all the LLMs available.
Yeah.
And the proprietary aspect of our technology is that we can apply the best combination of LLMs and OCR and CV to get the best outcomes for the use case at hand. So we're not just relying on one LLM, we're relying on many to get the best outputs. And the best means is a function of speed, accuracy, price, and security. So it really depends on what your use case is, but a lot of people build solutions around one of these options. And the other part of the challenge is that sometimes Gen AI isn't needed at all. It could be one step in the product in the pipeline, but it's not always the fastest and the best option for a particular use case. You can get just as good outcomes at a much cheaper and much faster price. So this is something that I think a lot of customers don't realize. It's not just a matter of kind of building around a single API. We've had customers that have tried, but sometimes it works for them because they're dealing with maybe a very simple standalone use case.
Yeah.
But if you're dealing with many, many different use cases, many different formats and languages, it's going to be a very, very challenging task and quite expensive to do.
Yeah. I was just listening through your answer there, and I was realizing, like, if I was sitting on the other side of the table with you, and tell me how well have I understood this? This is like a test for me, also a live test. You have to look at the complexity of what you're doing.
Yes.
If there's like a single language, single format, all pre-templated, go ahead, build something out. But if you are going to build out something which touches different data sources, languages, etc., so then you have to look at how complex it can get quickly. To Gen AI is not the answer, and I feel like this is a very good point that you have raised. Today, you go in, you talk to anybody, everybody's saying, "Oh, this should be Gen AI." But no, not really, right? There was a AI world before Gen AI.
Yeah.
Gen AI is good at restructuring your responses or being very easy to interact with because of the whole communicative aspect of it. So it has simplified how you engage with it. So everybody wants everything to be Gen AI. Every panel is Gen AI. Everything is Gen AI, right? So finding the right solution is the second part, and then within the right solution sets, also there are trade-offs to be made on cost, efficiency, etc. So you have to look at building a solution around this rather than just saying, "Oh, we can build." And one thing I feel like, because as in the day job we've rolled out a small model for our marketing and compliance to work together, right? And one thing that people underappreciate these days is the cost of acquiring this talent and keeping them with you. So I think
good point. Yeah.
It is
very
hard.
Good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, something I hadn't thought of. Yeah, absolutely.
So looking at all of these things, it is a great opportunity to work with somebody like you. And obviously, guys, this is not a paid promotion. I must tell you that it is still a passion project. But I was so impressed by what you were like talking about, and bringing all of these things together makes it, with the whole critical domain expertise that you bring in this area, it makes a very big use case to be working with Staple.
Yeah.
And so I was listening back. I was like, this is going really well. What do you think banks are doing wrong when it comes to AI or looking at AI use cases within their own bank?
Wow. Good question. It's a tricky time. There's some banks that we speak to that, I'm not going to name them, but they ban the use of generative AI for a lot of the critical operations of the bank. Rightly or wrongly, whether there's an actual perceived security risk, not for me to say. But that's a security and risk management decision.
Yeah,
completely get that. So, by the way, that works well for us because we can switch off generative AI in our platform to make sure the use case we process doesn't touch any LLM.
Yes,
and we use traditional algorithms to process still AI, but not LLMs.
Right.
So that's an option. So that's one aspect. I think it's not the bank's doing something wrong or getting something wrong. I just think it's an interesting time because some banks are embracing this and some are being extremely cautious with the uptake of Gen AI. I think there has to be some real critical assessment of the use cases that Gen AI is applied to. I think you've already mentioned some. So things such as customer support and other internal operations. I think there is a very good case for Gen AI. We've all used Gen AI to some level.
Yes.
ChatGPT, very creative responses. The thing is, in the work that we do, there is zero room for creativity in the answers that we give or the responses that AI gives. So there are some challenges around hallucinations or some very interesting answers that the AI will give if you give it a document one day and it will give it one response and then the next day it will give a different response.
Yeah. We
can't allow that in our solution. It's all about accuracy. So I think some caution and some, like I said, some critical assessment around the use cases that they apply the Gen AI to. I think in terms of what they're doing wrong, I can't really say, but these are just the areas that I see where there has to be some caution.
And no, absolutely. What we will do is I will ask you the last question,
Sure.
and then we'll hand you off to John. But you obviously have, you're a very successful fintech. You work with banks, but you also have a very big enterprise business, which is outside of banks.
Yes.
And we have talked about the challenges of being a fintech entrepreneur.
Right.
So what I'll do is I will let John ask you that question. I'm not going to ask you that question because obviously he can ask you more and go more in depth of it. The challenges of being a fintech entrepreneur, dealing with financial institutions, and obviously, feel free to grill him. But before you go down that path, one thing that you could change in this whole AI landscape today, no holds bar.
Wow. One thing I could change. It's a big question. I mean, I don't think I would change much. I think it's a fantastic time to be getting started as an entrepreneur, whether it's fintech entrepreneur or otherwise. I like the fact that AI has empowered a lot of non-traditional developers or inexperienced or hobby developers to start building products with very limited skills or background to speak of in the area.
Yep.
So I think that's been really empowering for a lot of people who've been thinking about getting started and perhaps didn't have the technical chops to do so. I do think there are certain countries where they've restricted access to some of the generative AI tools or the AI tools.
Okay.
I think that's a shame. I think that if you don't allow users to access these tools, you may be putting yourselves behind.
Okay.
So there's not a lot I would really change. I think a lot of these large organizations need to spend some time understanding what's possible, what's not possible. We talked about before how some people think Gen AI is a cure-all or a panacea for a range of different problems.
Yeah.
That's not the case. So maybe just some more awareness around what is possible and what's not possible in this area.
And a lovely session, it show this is your responses were so mature, so centered, so such a calm session. So great job on handling this. Now the next part of this episode is with John, obviously,
right?
And he will start with you with that question on challenges of being a fintech entrepreneur or working with the financial industry.
I look forward to it.
And absolutely. So John, we are going to bring you in. Thank you, everyone.
Well, welcome back, everybody. I have with me here, John. Welcome. I'm shaking things up at this point. I'm going to ask you a question before we get started, if that's all right.
Ben, it's been a while since we've seen each other, so
yeah. Just cut straight to the chase. You work in the innovation team of a bank. You work with startups and you work with fintech entrepreneurs. And on behalf of those entrepreneurs, thank you. Thank you for being a big part of the ecosystem. But through personal experience, I've been through a number of POCs with financial institutions, and it can be a tough and quite a drawn out process for a startup that has limited revenue, limited investor support, limited funding. So just on behalf of those entrepreneurs and those fintechs, I just want to get a better understanding of why, first of all, POCs are required, which is probably an easier question. But secondly, why those POCs can take 6, 12, 18 months, particularly when these startups have a very limited lifeblood of funding to survive.
Wow, that's a tough question to hit it off. But okay, let me do my best. I've been doing this for a while. I think the reality behind it is when we talk about POCs, the idea of POCs essentially is to prove that the solution actually works for whatever problem statement we have, right? So it's not one where we see a solution and we're immediately going to buy a solution, right? And the idea behind it is let's use, as at least my thesis is, let's use a small amount of money that we have that we're going to try and test something. And I know you mentioned that you don't do free POCs, which I think is great. I think it's good to believe in the value that your product brings itself, and I think that's fantastic. And the idea behind, so coming back to that, is really the idea behind it is how do we actually prove that this works along the way? Right. Starting off with an early POC, proof of concept, you get 20, 30 people trying it out. Yes, it does some value. Now that takes, from the initial conversation, from my experience, I think in general with a large corporate across the board, right? Generally between 3 and 9 months, I would say, right? Before you actually try the POC, get the results out of that. And then after that, once you get those results, what are you going to do? Roll it out into a full enterprise scale itself, if it's successful, right? And then that's another, 12 to 18 month conversation, I believe, in the typical sense, right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, it can be.
And I think with B2B, I think that's a very, very big challenge, right? It's doing a B2B sale. The sales cycle is extremely long. I think even if you look at large technology companies, they have the same challenge around sales cycles. Now, the view that I have at least is that how do we then try and condense this cycle itself? But you also must understand the makeup or the DNA of a corporate itself, right? Running on yearly budgets. Nobody has money lying around to just implement a new solution.
Sure.
So being able to get into the right time frame, in terms of the budgeting cycle. So you got to prove the value before you go into that budgeting cycle, and then you say, now look, we've used Staple, we've tried it out with Staple, we believe, or rather, we have the data points that justify that Staple is actually going to save us X amount of impact or efficiency, and we need X amount of dollars to now bring it into a full live solution for the entire organization itself.
Sure.
And and I get it. And I apologize for my corporate colleagues, right? It is a grind. But we're here to see how we drive that forward, right? And in what I do, essentially my goal is proving value at every stage of the process and having enough data that says that, yes, we need to use a solution like Staple because it drives value back for the organization.
Understood. To be clear, this is not a problem we face today. It was a problem that Staple faced maybe 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. Today, we don't do that many POCs. We go straight to a production contract. But there are some instances where POC is necessary to work with a financial institution. I'm asking that more from the perspective of these people who may have just got started or maybe 1 or 2 years.
But it's the same thing. I think at the end of the day, you're absolutely right. The reality behind it is that it's tough to be a B2B startup, right, in this current market itself, right?
You raised a good point. That's probably a good tip for a lot of entrepreneurs. Be mindful of the budgeting cycle for these large organizations and enterprises, because it's not something I think we would think of ordinarily.
So you think if you want to buy something, you just buy something, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think there's perhaps this image that you do have piles of money lying around to be spent.
no, well, maybe some organizations do, but not everyone has. Of course. I think we can chat a little bit more about POCs.
Sure.
But thanks, Ben, for the tough question, since it's been a while since we've seen each other. Very quick, welcome. So I'm gonna take this back now.
It's all yours.
I'm gonna take this back now, and so I'm welcome to the next Big Fin. I'm John. I lead the global innovation team for Bank Julius Baer. My team is responsible for looking at what's coming in Horizon 2 and 3. So what's coming next 3 to 5 to 7 years that's going to have an impact for us from a bank perspective. We work a lot with startups. We incubate and look at AI, tokenization, digital assets, whatever new technologies that's on the horizon, and trying to figure out how we do. So I have a fun job. And here I am, and thanks so much, Laksh and Janice, for having me to co-host some of these sessions. It's an amazing opportunity to have some conversations with some amazing founders. So Ben, let's kick it off. And I'm back in the driving seat. So I like that. I like that position. And I love to hear a bit more about your story and your challenges of as you mentioned earlier, right? Is some working with corporates. How do you actually, and any advice you can give for younger entrepreneurs who are entering this journey itself?
Yeah. Well, I think we touched on it a little bit already. Understanding that selling to enterprises isn't the same as selling to an SME. And this is something I had experience with. We started out initially selling to SMEs, much simpler organizations. You deal with the decision maker pretty much from day one, almost all the time. But with enterprises, I think there's a little bit of a maze of people you have to navigate in order to get a contract, right? You very rarely speak to the ultimate decision maker first. You may deal with someone like yourself or someone who's in the digital transformation or business process excellence or some kind of technology team member to find your way into the organization. And then there's probably functional business unit leaders who will ultimately be a decision maker or refer it to the ultimate decision maker. But along the way, you have to navigate security, risk management, procurement as the ultimate kind of signatories on the contract or the price negotiation. So I think that's been one of the biggest learnings for me. Even though I came from corporate, I still operated in a very narrow area of those corporates. I wasn't really involved in the entire life cycle of business decisions. So that was a learning experience. Being prepared for these very long sales cycles. I think selling to enterprises who are not financial, you can probably close a deal in 3 to 6 months. But as you alluded to, banks and insurance companies and financial institutions, you're looking more to 9 to potentially 18 months or more to close a deal, depending on the contract type and the contract size. So be prepared for that, and make sure you have the team and the runway to support you through that journey. There's probably other deals you'd be working on at the same time. So that's something to also be aware of. And then also in that process of speaking to risk management, speaking to security, speaking to the enterprise environment team, you have to be able to answer a range of questions around your InfoSec. So whether those InfoSec questions are answered through your SOC 2 certification or your ISO certification or otherwise. If you don't have that, either of those certifications, you're probably facing a 400 questionnaire, or maybe you have to do that questionnaire anyway. I'm not sure, but these are the kinds of things that are part and parcel of dealing with financial institutions, I think, as prospective customers.
But it's gotten easy over the years, right?
I think so. I mean, there are a lot of. I think I mentioned to Laksh before. The first one is always the hardest. So once you've done one of these, you know what to expect. You're better prepared the next time. But then there are also a range of tools and platforms out there to help manage your compliance with the various security certifications and or even tools to help navigate that maze I mentioned around the decision makers in an organization. I think there's tools out there to help to map the different people in a big enterprise that would integrate with your CRM or whatever. So yeah, I think it is getting easier, continues to get easier, but it is still a long journey. I think every single deal can take months.
And from that perspective, right? How has Staple as a product evolved over the years as well? With your customers, right? Give me a bit of a viewpoint of that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing that's been built into our product from day one is usability. And I know that's kind of a throwaway phrase or description, But think about enterprise software in the traditional sense. It's typically quite difficult to use, overly complicated, not really fit for purpose for every single user. We had this advantage. Well, I think in hindsight, it was an advantage because when we started out, we had to build a very user-friendly product that was easy to pick up and start using from day one, because we were selling to SMEs, individuals who, if you didn't hook them and have them onboarded in, an hour, they'd probably leave it. Because you think about the software you and I use as consumers every day. If it's not nice to use, you're not going to use it. You'll find something else. But enterprise software is more often thrust upon on users by procurement or the decision makers. So we've kept that kind of ingrained in our product from day one. And although we've gone from servicing SMEs to enterprises, we haven't lost that DNA. We still have a very usable product, and we had feedback recently from someone who switched from a competitor of ours. That customer said that it took them 2 weeks to train their users on their competitor product. It took them half a day to train their users on Staple. That's something that hasn't changed so much. I mean, as our evolution has gone over the years, that's something that we've retained, and I think it's helped a lot in our favor. But what has changed is the fact that we are, helping enterprise customers on board. We need to hold their hand, so to speak, with the journey of integrating our software, and that half-day training process is not something we would expect them to do themselves. We can train the users directly. So there's more of a directed approach to delivering our software. The other thing is that we started in Singapore. We've always had the ability to service customers across geographies, but we are dealing with very global organizations today. So in the early days, we were working with Singapore headquartered companies that were operating in other countries. Now we're deploying our solution in the US, in China, in South America, in Japan. We have users today in 56 countries, and we definitely don't have offices in that many countries. We only have offices in a few, but we've spent a lot of time thinking about how we can seamlessly deliver our solution anywhere in the world. That's not something as simple as just spinning up an instance somewhere. You have to be mindful of data residency and all these other legal requirements, but we're able to do that, do that implementation and still comply with these regulatory requirements in each jurisdiction. So these are a few things that spring to mind, I think, in terms of what's changed with us and the kinds of customers that we're working with.
But what about, and it sounds like you listen a lot to the users, right? Your customers, right? Around what needs to be done, how do you actually make it better? And, in this era of AI, and I know Staple has had from day one already, you're using some form of AI in your product already.
Yep.
How has that also evolved? I'm going more into it. And I know you discussed a little bit of this with Laksh earlier on, right? But I'd love to understand a bit more from your perspective around how you make those decisions, right? As a founder, right? And deciding around, okay, what is it, you're going to focus on in terms of how do you integrate that? How do you take your product to the next level?
Yeah. We definitely listen to our existing customers, and I am looped into that feedback all the time. You need to be attuned to that feedback. And it's not something just that the customer support team will handle. It's something that me and my co-founder listen to directly and care deeply about. So we are always looking for ways to improve our solution in terms of accuracy, efficiency, cost, speed. So that's something that's a constant battle, I guess. We're always making sure we're optimizing that solution. But in terms of what we focus on, it's very much kind of we have a kind of a land and expand approach, I suppose. So we usually work with a customer with a single use case. They will like the results that the system gives for a particular use case or a particular workflow. They will, explore the possibility of adopting our solution for other use cases, and then, we're able to service them in other areas as well. There's also an element of just being mindful of where the market is going. I know in certain areas there's a shift to not just unstructured documentation or PDF transfers, but also EDI, e-invoice. So just be mindful of where the market and the technology is going. In those cases, AI is needed very little, but it is something that's being adopted by customers too. So we don't just do documents in the traditional sense. We do documents that a human may never actually look at. We consider a document to be some kind of any kind of information record, any kind of file, any kind of information record that needs to be processed. So we can do the documents that, in the traditional sense that AI can read, but also the structured data as well. So that is something that is increasing in adoption in multiple markets. So that's something we need to be mindful of as we move the evolution of the product.
And what is in your opinion, what is the moat that you have? And how have you created that moat for Staple itself? Because you also mentioned, right, a lot of times corporate IT says we can build it ourselves, and then they come back to you later on. How do you design get to that moat?
So I think there's a couple of areas. There's a range of different moats that you can talk about. I think we have an element of technical moat and also more of a commercial moat in terms of distribution. I'll talk about the technical one first. I mentioned with Laksh before, where generative AI is required or is where generative AI delivers the best outcome for a particular use case, which models do we use? And I said we use the best one that's available for that particular use case. We partner with all the major foundational model providers, and we can toggle between each of those to deliver the best outcomes in terms of speed, accuracy, security, and cost. And that means we're not tied to any one particular foundational model. We haven't built our solution as a dependency on one of those. We've also got a lot of training data that we built our solution on from day one. A lot of the existing companies train their data on a data set that was English, Latin characters. That's not the case for us. We started from Singapore, 4 languages spoken here from the outset. But we worked with a lot of global organizations that gave us access to a training data set that was very difficult for others to access. And that was 200 plus languages, and that's where we are today. We have a model that's able to process 210 different languages or 240 different languages. And this has been the case almost since our first year. And over the years, it continues to improve. The continued usage of our product also helps to constantly evolve our accuracy and constantly evolve the feedback that we get from all our customers. So that's on the technical side. On the commercial side, we have a lot of deep partnerships with the large enterprise ERP software providers, as well as implementation partners in different parts of the world. So these large system integrators, some of the Big Four accounting firms, some of the other non-Big Four implementation companies. I won't mention names, but they work with us refer opportunities to us quite often. So that's more on the commercial side, I think, where we are often the solution of choice for a lot of large digital transformation projects that are multinational.
And coming to this multinational point, right? You've gone global.
Yep.
Right. And I think congratulations on that. I think it's definitely a feat, right?
Yeah,
To take an idea and a solution, from a start all the way into this where you are today. How do you see the difference in terms of, across geographies now? In terms of when you're working with clients across geographies, right? Do you see, what is the biggest difference and challenge that you've had, right? Trying to move into these different markets, obviously with different, different cultures, different languages, different.
Yeah.
What is the biggest challenge that you would highlight that maybe we can, help some other entrepreneurs who are going down this journey mitigate?
I mean, this is something that is very difficult to do on your own. If you're trying to expand into different markets with your own team, obviously as a startup, you have very limited, constrained resources. So it's hard to kind of be everywhere and be able to deliver your solution everywhere. I think there's a couple of points. So if you're a startup and you're trying to grow your product using product-led growth in Asia, you will have a very difficult time. If you're selling it maybe in India or the US or just in China, those markets are sufficiently large to be able to sell your product on a PLG basis. In Asia, especially Southeast Asia, where we are, the market is quite fragmented. The buying patterns are so different from country to country, and it's just very difficult to scale with a PLG approach. So you need to have a sales-led approach, but like I said, it's hard to do that if you're relying on your own team. So for us, partnerships was the answer. So growing your partners in the markets where you are targeting, that was the way to kind of reach customers directly. I think a lot of enterprise buyers in Asia, at least, will buy based on relationship more so than product. So that's. I mean, I like to think our product is excellent as it is, but relationship seems to matter just as much, if not more. It's one challenge, and obviously localization of the product is something you need to be mindful of as well. Not just language. There are things that you need to consider for every country. For example, I mean, there's some considerations in Japan. If you're selling software there, there is some kind of metric they measure for software, which takes account of the ability to interact with the UI based on one finger. Reason being is because a lot of workers are accessing software on the metro while one hand is holding the rail and the other hand is on the phone. So you need to design the software in a way that they can navigate with one finger or their thumb. This is something that I don't think a lot of software companies think of from country to country, but there are localization requirements that you need to be mindful of as well. But I do think the biggest challenge is around like I said, the sales-led approach, but specifically through partnerships, because that way you can leverage the sales teams of your partners as opposed to the sales team that you may not have.
Great. I mean, I think that's great advice for someone who is trying to scale their business into these markets itself.
If you can sell just in one market, that's obviously better. But I mean, Singapore's not the biggest market. I mean, it's a great market to start in, but I still believe you need to find a way to sell to other markets as quickly as you can. Being in Southeast Asia, it's a huge market, but it is just very fragmented. And for that reason, there's slightly different ways that people buy software.
Different challenges on that front.
Yeah.
As a founder, what is one of the things that keeps you up at night? when you look at when you think about Staple
Wow.
or going through this journey?
There's a lot of things. I mean, I remember, I think it was Elon Musk. This is kind of cliche, but as a founder, you often, you often receive all the bad news of the company in a distilled form all the time. Even if you're hiring people to handle certain areas, that someone's probably handling finance, someone's handling product, someone's handling customer success, etc. And the problems that make their way to you are always the problems that those people can't handle. So that means you're dealing with the hardest problems and probably the bad news that all these other people can't handle. So you're getting a distilled form of just negativity all the time as the company grows. So that's, I mean, that's not to say that there's only bad news. There's good time. There's very high highs and low lows, but you're often dealing with problems that nobody else can solve. That's why you're the founder, I suppose. But there are a lot of things that keep me up at night for that reason. So I just, making sure we deliver on time, making sure we hit our targets, making sure we can grow to the next milestone. I mean, things that keep me up at night are calls at very, late at night or very early in the morning with different time zones. So yeah, that also cuts into my sleep time.
And tell me about the time when you signed your first commercial contract.
Ooh.
Tell me about, can you remember that feeling?
Yeah. Well, that's a high. That's a very high. Well, I mean, our first customer, our first customer was a small customer, so it was on credit card. So we got, we had a subscription come in online and, seeing the notification on Stripe or whatever, one of the payment processors. That was a pretty nice feeling. Like actually having something that people are willing to pay for. It's just something that I think a lot of early stage founders will enjoy. But then our first big enterprise contract, it was relief in some respects. I mean, I talked about before how we had a lot of customers really suffer through COVID, didn't make it through COVID. So by extension, we lost customers at that time. But yeah, signing our first enterprise deal in that time, it was great. I mean, I think initially we signed a POC, a paid POC, mind you. We got paid for the POC and then converted to a paid contract. And weirdly, it was, it was a digital contract. We didn't even meet the customer in person, which was kind of strange. It was an enterprise deal, but we never met the customer in person because everyone's working from home. But yeah, that was a fantastic feeling. Yeah, one of the high highs, I think. I think it's better than closing a fundraising round. Like getting the customer contract for the first time. It's a great feeling.
That validation, right?
It is, yeah.
We've built something that someone actually wants to pay for.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's a bigger deal than closing your first funding round. Definitely.
Wow, that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
And I mean, for what's next? You guys have conquered the world.
No, not quite.
What's next for Staple? What's the next? This is the next big fin.
Yeah.
What's the next big thing for you for Staple in the next 12, 18 months?
Yeah. So we are not just focused on this. We've called it the first mile of data processing. We extract the data, we clean up the data, we reconcile the data. We also do the indexation and making it searchable. So a lot of our customers, this is another thing actually to your earlier question. We listen to the customers and how does that guide our development process for the future? So another point is that we've noticed that a lot of our customers prefer to use our solution to search for information or insights more so than other systems of record or other tools or data systems. So they're staying in Staple to find answers to particular business problems that they have. And having seen this behavior with a few large customers, we've asked them about it, and they just prefer to use it because it's easier to use, as I said, and it's faster, and they can get the source of truth, the source documents to support those answers immediately. So we've been working with Google recently on the natural language search capability within our system. We use elements of Gen AI to do this, to give answers, but to also generate insights, develop executive reporting, etc. But more than that, we can do that without hallucinations. So we use Gen AI for some aspects of our product. Gen AI has a tendency to get a little bit creative sometimes. We can't allow that in our product. There's no room for kind of creativity or high temperature answers. So we have to anchor it in truth. We have a proprietary approach to do that, to give answers and basically do that without the need for a secondary data lake or anything like that. They can do it within Staple and our own database. So that's something we're looking to release in the next 6 months. We've had a lot of interest in that particular capability.
Oh, that sounds exciting. I love hearing about new product features.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that really keeps me going every time my team comes to me and says, we got this new feature. It's really exciting to hear about it. Sounds amazing. I mean, we'll love to hear more about it. I know after this, but I think we're almost there. So the last question for you, Ben, is, and this is going to hit me a little bit more as well. So, for someone like myself, right, where we drive corporate innovation, working with startups, if you could say anything to me unfiltered, what would you say? Right, in a sense, right? What would you tell me?
I feel like I kind of asked you that question already. It was a question I asked you at the start. I guess, firstly, thank you. Thank you for being open enough to work with startups that are completely on the other end of the spectrum in terms of capitalization and business size. I think just maybe continue more of that. So continue being open to work with fintechs. I know it's possible for banks to innovate internally. But it really helps to look at not just for startups, but it helps the banks as well to be open to working with up and coming fintechs who are very capable in a certain area. One point that I learned coming back from London Tech Week this year. There was a bank, I can't even tell you who it was, I can't remember which one it was. There was a bank that discovered that it costs on average 5 times as much to build a tool internally than to contract with an external provider of software. And that's due to the charge out rates, that's due to the various approvals that are needed, the headcount you need to maintain. So in many respects, it makes a lot of sense to work with startups, to solve these problems within a financial institution. And that's the kind of the proof, so to speak. So keep an open mind.
Thanks for the advice, Ben. And I will commit to actually continue to keep that open mind. It's been a fantastic conversation. Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time.
No, thanks for having me, John.
No, it's been amazing, and thanks Laksh and DigiJanice for having me. Well, with that, I think we're closing up for this session of the Next Big Fin. Do check out Staple and hit Ben up for a conversation on how they can actually help you with your data.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.